Oh, yes.
Good afternoon, ladybugs and yellow jackets. Welcome to this Black Friday's episode of Author Reads here on Fae Productions. You're with myself, a Fairy Princess Lully, who is your host. And before I jump into the show today, I shall give my due diligence to please hit the like and subscribe and ring the bell if you want to get future notifications about our shows. And this weekend is definitely a weekend for that because our next show is the day after tomorrow, Sunday. We are still on the Black Friday Cyber Samhain weekend, and Handmade Home Shopping is our vendor show. So definitely go over there and get the notifications so you don't miss that. Excuse me, little frog. But with that said, also, I want to give a shout out to today's show sponsor, which is Pixies Potions. And you may have seen them. They've been here on Handmade Home Shopping before. Pixies Potions is a single mom-run Tacoma-based business focused on healthy alternatives to everyday personal care and pain relief products. They feature high-quality, responsibly sourced ingredients from Better Shea Butter, Majestic Pure Essential Oils, and Nature's Best CBD. They also specialize in small batch, handcrafted body, face, and beard care products, gentlemen. Yes, it is not just all for lovely baths. You keep up some ZZ Top going on there. Uh-oh, did I just date my fairy self? Yes. So please check out their full line at www.pixiespotions.com. The link is in the low bar and in the ticker going right there. And also, if you are local to the Tacoma area, that's Tacoma, Washington, you can use the code LOCALDELIVER, all one word, LOCALDELIVER, for free local delivery within with orders over $20 and within a 20-mile radius of Tacoma. So, with that said, yes, woo, woo, yeah. And with that said, we are here today with our author, Vanessa MacLaren-Wray. I did say that right? I said that all right?
Yes. You're so good.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. Sometimes I get them.
that W throws people over there.
It's like the K in knife, right? It's a knife that can make it. So, welcome to the show, Vanessa.
Hey there.
Yes, please.
If you anybody else,
please introduce yourself to our audience a little bit, and if you will, now is the time to give shout-outs to anybody you feel needs a shout-out, whether that's your publisher or your home peeps or whatever it may be. So.
Hey there. Well, I'm Vanessa MacLaren-Wray. I'm writing science fiction and fantasy. This is the one that's out, and this is from Paper Angel Press, which is a small indie press based in San Jose, California. And they'll be looking for new submissions around about February. So come over to their website and check it out. So hi to Stephen and all the gang who are supposedly hanging out watching this somewhere secretly. So if especially snarky comments come up in the chat, we'll know who they are. That's where I am. I've got my first book out, and I'm excited about getting more people reading it, and with the cooperation of my publisher, I'm also agent hunting. So I'm going to read a section from a book I'm currently putting out for querying to agents. So any agents out there, you can get a little free sample.
Well, so I'm curious now. Now you have actually managed to put your book out this year in 2020. How has this COVID quarantining affected you? Because I know that some authors we've had have said, I had a book I was planning to do, and then all of the crazy happened.
Well, luckily we got this book out right before the pandemic hit, so at least publication happened. All the fun things that go with getting a new book out, that was what got kind of kiboshed. My local bookstore was going to do a little launch party.
Oh.
We were going to go to all the science fiction conventions with it, and we could
get your author table.
I did manage to squeeze in a couple of appearances on online conventions, but it's not the same. You can't, sit with people and sign books and do all that good stuff, So it was a little disappointing, but there's always next year. We're grown-ups.
Right?
You
I hope there's next year anyway. So, hey, check it out. You have a hello from Paper Angel Press. Hello.
Yay. Woo.
They're out there. So they did not give you.
Well, the authors usually get together and chat about stuff, and we work together on craft. So I'm up to about 4 critique groups and craft groups at this point. So,
So that's an interesting thing. Critique groups. Can you? A lot of the people that watch are sometimes aspiring authors and whatnot. And tell me about critique groups and how you think they've benefited you.
Oh, well, a really good critique circle, you will meet pretty regularly, ideally once a week, maybe twice a month, depending on lifetime schedules, and take turns just reading each other's stories and giving fair and honest criticism. And, you're always supportive, but, if you notice that in chapter 1, somebody's character had red hair, and then chapter 4, they're blonde, or that somebody chopped off somebody's head 3 pages ago, and that person is walking around now. Continuity errors, whether the language is flowing nicely, if you need to increase the pacing because it's an action sequence.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you really get into your words, and you have a long paragraph, and your critique partner says, "Isn't this a battle?" You need to have short paragraphs and people saying short comments, not 3 lines of "I see your cloak is very nice today," and "Arg."
Not an intro to a Tolkien book.
So it's extremely valuable. In a way, a critique circle is like a group of beta readers that you can really count on. This book was very thoroughly critiqued with the Morgan Hill writers group, and I'm going through my next book with them, and then I'm sending it over to a second critique group for my second revision. So it's extremely valuable. But you do have to work at it, because if you're in a critique circle, the deal is you have to help your fellow writers. So it's a give and take. The bonus is you get to read a lot of people's work before it goes anywhere. So, and you have a hand in helping somebody develop something new, and that can be really exciting. So it's work, but it is work. So.
I'm curious, when you do that, do you have the ability to ask the critiquers when you read this? Because if you do multiple groups, right, it's likely that by the time you get to group 2 or group 3, maybe certain things have already been critiqued. Not to say that another person won't catch something that was missed, but if you're looking for, like you say, I am looking specifically for continuity errors, so please put your critique mind towards this. Is that a thing that they are amenable to, or is it just always the group of people reading kind of for whatever jumps out at them?
Well, it's a little of both, really. You can always say, this is my 3rd draft, and right. I'm really concerned that I may have continuity errors at this point. Can you tell me which characters are really appealing to people? Is the villain villainy enough? Are the nice people nice enough? Is the ambiguous person ambiguous, or are you getting him? So you can obviously ask questions, because these people, you work with a critique circle more than a couple of months, and then they're your best friends. And I have Telegram chat groups with critique friends. I have Slacks with critique friends. We're meeting once a week, and you find out about their lives. It becomes a friendship circle and a support group. So the hard part really is to restrain yourself from that and say, okay, we've only got a couple hours here. We need to discuss the work.
Yeah.
during the group meeting, because you want to talk about things, you want to chit chat, but you also want to move the work forward and get the books as good as they can be, and also, get them finished, because that's one thing working with a group will do. It'll make you say, oh my gosh, I have group on Wednesday. I need to edit that chapter by Tuesday so that everybody can see it.
Right.
And you can't say, I don't feel like doing that today. You have to say, oh, everyone's counting on me to get that in. And then they're going to count on me to do my critiques. And the other thing I've noticed is if I'm doing critique on somebody else, the value portion is I'll notice something in somebody else's chapter, and then I'll be writing them a note. You really need to think about this, and this part, and you've made it really passive voice here. And then I'll look at my chapter and say, I was doing that too. So you'll improve yourself by working with others. So yeah, and nobody's the boss.
Right.
It's not like school, like submitting it to a teacher or to an agent who's going to say, oh, this will never sell. You're submitting it to friends who are writers who understand where you're trying to go, and will support you in that, and also will tell you when you've gone off the rails,
And so today, if you will, tell us a little bit about what you've got for us, what you're going to be reading to us today.
Yeah, what I've got for you today is I'm going to read part of the beginning of this story, and there's a secret that you will get when I get to the end of that chapter. This book has too many spoilers in it. It's hard to find a section that I can read in a group like this and not give away stuff. It's sort of a character adventure story. So I'm going to get through that, and then I'm going to read, oh my gosh, manuscript pages. So this is manuscript format, guys. So I'm going to read the opening to the new book, which is fantasy. So I brought you a piece of science fiction and a piece of fantasy. And they're both, the thing that they have in common is that they're both about characters who come together and become friends.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, I love stories about friendships, especially unlikely friendships of people that you don't really belong together. Like in All That Was Asked, we have a person who meets an alien and becomes friends with them. And it's rather challenging when you can't speak the same language, when you don't have the same culture, and you have nothing to start with.
Right.
Ground zero, and it's not Star Trek, so you don't have a universal translator.
No, or your little babble fish from
no babble fish, nothing. You're just stuck waving your hands and saying, well, how about
right.
So it makes for some humor. It makes for some challenges for the characters to get by. And in the fantasy story, the chapter I'm reading is basically 3 very different people who are going to ultimately become best friends. So.
Nice.
And this is a good time to talk about friendships right now in this world when everyone's friends.
So the setting of All That Was Asked, which is the first book, the sci-fi one, the setting is here on Earth with an alien, or on another planet with a human off planet.
Well, it's a subgenre of a portal story, so it's an alternate universe. So it's okay. Earth, but is it Earth?
Earth-like?
It's very, very Earth-like. The setting is very California. The physical environment, at least in the opening chapter, is very California.
And well, you are in San Diego, right? Did I get that right?
I'm near San Jose.
San Jose.
So right in the middle. But from your perspective, yeah, it looks pretty much. Well, you're up in Washington, right?
Yes, I am. And I actually get California geography with the cities quite terrible. I think that what I know is Disneyland is in SoCal because it's in Orange County, and San Diego is south of that because it's close to Tijuana and SeaWorld.
Very good.
And then everything else is someplace else in California.
Everything else is NorCal. Yep. All the good bits.
But where NorCal starts is what I don't know, right? So
yeah, right around San Luis Obispo.
don't know where that's at.
Yes, well, that's where Santa Barbara. That where surfing happens.
A soap opera that I used to watch.
Oh yes, and Psych, which is supposedly set in Santa Barbara, only is actually set in Washington State. Filmed in your territory, set in ours.
Right? We're back and forth here. Okay, so with that, we'll get to the. Oh, let me ask really quick. What is the setting of the second one? What is the fantasy setting?
It's a fictional country and an isolated land up in the mountains somewhere where you can't get to, where people have lived a long time in isolation.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, so we will get to the reading portion of this, and for you all who are watching, and this may be your first time, just so you know how this is going to happen here, I will give Vanessa the entire screen. She will read for us. I will be on mute and in the comments. And if you guys, as you have questions or something pops to your mind, please put your questions in the comments, and then when she's done reading, we will go take your questions one by one for her to answer after the show. And then at the very end, getting on towards 3 o'clock, we will do a drawing. And actually today, I've been informed by Vanessa, we actually get to draw twice. We get to spin the wheel twice for 2 winners today. Hooray, Black Friday! One for a physical copy and one for an audio copy of the book. So with that said, I will go ahead and I'm going to turn the screen over to you here, Vanessa. There you are. Putting myself on mute.
Look at all the books. I'm only going to read from this book. So this is my book from Paper Angel Press, which if you don't win the prize, you can get the digital edition for 99 cents all weekend long. Ooh. So I'm going to start a little bit into the beginning because there are spoilers right at the beginning, just to make it effective. So at the beginning, the main thing that you need to know is that our hero, Ansegwe, is basically an intern who's been dragged along on an exploratory expedition to an alternate universe on a mission that's funded by his family. So he's kind of, a nepotism appointee, and nobody really likes him on the team. The forest we trekked through obstructed potential vistas of distant peaks or nearby valleys, but there were other sights that went unappreciated by my compatriots. Where slopes tilted more steeply, the forest was broken by long, near vertical open stretches, giving play to rich green meadow grasses and intensely bright flowers. The flowers drew the eye with fantastic patterns etched in glittering iotic purples, those high-frequency wavelengths so easily seen and so tricky to capture in a photograph. I enjoyed pausing at these junctures to take in the views, but Kulandari unromantically proclaimed those open spaces to be avalanche chutes and pointed to the stumps of shattered trees as evidence. It was at the base of one of these dangerously steep hillsides that the tedium was finally broken. We'd been granted a break, ordered to rest in the protective shade of the trees. As usual, I was daydreaming, disobeying my superiors in order to bask in the afternoon sunlight slanting through the edge of the canopy. Abruptly, from upslope, I heard shouts. I think I had the dim notion that some member of our party had gone exploring up there, so I stepped out to wave the supposed stragglers to our hidden position. If I had been thinking instead of dreaming, perhaps I would have noticed that the shouts were not those of my people. Instead, I found myself alone and in plain view of the primitives we'd been seeking for so long and with such circumspection. I no longer wondered if we might somehow have accidentally failed to see the stickmen. Such creatures we could not have missed. These particular specimens were vocalizing loudly while waving either tools or weapons. Alarmingly, they were only 100 strides or so away, though uphill. 2 had somehow affixed themselves to the backs of much larger bony quadrupeds. Their hides, or clothing, blended with the soft brown coats of the beasts they rode. The ultimate effect was that of a pair of strangely misshapen persons, consistent with the early reports that had drawn us out on this expedition. To this day, I am not sure if the stickmen ever actually saw me. My philosophy mentor insists that they visually perceived but failed to conceptualize my actual presence, because to them my appearance would be only an unacceptable anomaly. In fact, Tocomley argues that I was invisible, concealed by the cloak of cognitive disconnection. This is all a bit much for my pedestrian way of thinking, but it is true that they did not react to my presence. One would have expected cries of surprise, or even screams of horror. However, for my part, I would have been satisfied if they had just fled over the hill. At the time, however, the stickmen and I were all focused on something other than one another. There was a third factor in play. Something else was crashing its way down the slope, taking a noisy, sliding route just inside the tree line on the opposite side of the avalanche path. This gave me the impression that I had encountered a hunting party. Perhaps, I thought, I might prove my worth to the expedition by making some sensible observations of this activity. At the same time, I fervently wished there was some way I could catapult my handsome, calloused backside, not to mention the rest of my person, back into concealment. Luckily, the stickmen remained intent on their prey, which burst out of cover very near the bottom of the slope, opposite my exposed position. I expected to see one of the delicate little browsers that we had encountered numerous times, or possibly one of those slinky, brush-tailed predators, in which case I might be able to document these people as herders defending domesticated flocks. Instead, the creature dashing towards me resembled the stickmen, being at least partially bipedal, though it went on all fours most of the time. However, rather than that friendly shade of brown, its hide was practically colorless, though its eyes were dark. The stickmen let out more of their incomprehensible noises as soon as they spotted the pale creature. I felt a queasy distaste at the idea that they would hunt a creature so obviously close to their evolutionary line of descent. For a moment, I questioned my hypothesis that they were hunting. My doubts evaporated when a projectile speared the earth so close to me that I could see soil puff into the air when the weapon struck. I expected the animal to startle at the missile and dodge back into the forest primeval. To my surprise, it labored onward, and my alarm redoubled, for its path lay directly towards me. There was nothing for it. I gathered myself for what I was sure would be a completely visible, incompletely successful, spring back to my comrades in the shadows. But then the animal began making noises, high-pitched squealing sounds, and I was distracted enough to turn back towards it. Most alarmingly, the animal had adjusted its path, and instead of veering away, it aimed itself precisely in my direction. As it ran, it kept rising up from its four-footed scramble, sliding on the loose soil and ululating crazily. If it had been a large animal, or even a small one with sharp teeth, I might have screamed myself. But it was clearly a non-predatory beast, revealing only flat, grazing animal teeth as it howled. The thin, clawless forefeet it thrashed in the air indicated its charge was only a sham display. Perhaps it had young nearby to defend. I stood my ground, quelled my impulse to gesture for help, and kept silent. With any luck, the thing would dodge at the last moment and plunge into the forest behind me, making it then the problem of my so-called teammates. Another projectile landed, this one nearly at my feet. Belatedly, I remembered the other potential threat in the field. I hesitated. Oh, the slow-as-mud thinking of the young. Should I draw my stazer? Would it frighten them off or make them angrier? Or should I make a run for it and draw their fire directly? As always, when one party hesitates, the other takes the initiative. Into that gap sprang the colorless creature. It leaped past the second spear, launching itself into a sliding dive that ended with it clutching my talus so tightly the foot below ceased its insistent throbbing. I stopped breathing and stared down in genuine horror as it clambered its way halfway up my leg. The thing continued shrieking, but now released one set of claws and aimed that forelimb towards the stickmen, stretching one digit out, for all the world like a person pointing out an item of interest. The pursuers had abandoned their steeds and began furiously skid-sliding down the slope, still shouting. Frantic, I looked back and forth between the hunters hefting their weapons and the creature attached to my forelimb. In that moment, as easily as sliding a new lens into place on one of Jimenga's infernal microscopes, I saw the prey clearly. It was not howling like an animal. It was jabbering like a person in peril. It was talking, and it was talking to me. Clearly, it had a great deal that it desired to communicate to me regarding the stickmen. Were there two intelligent species here? And how was it that one seemed oblivious to me, while the other not only recognized me as a person and further was determined to make contact and convince me to protect it from its pursuers? In that moment of epiphany, my reactions were not well thought out. I suppose I might have shouted something to scare off the stickmen. Surely, simply drawing their attention to my physical appearance would have served nicely. But no, not Onsagwe, proud scion of the notorious family Varela. I snapped the staser out of my front pocket and gave the stickmen a quick jolt of electric shock via ultraviolet ionization. Contrary to the concerns expressed in the contact handbook, this did not seem to accelerate the stickmen's technological advancement. But it did result in their falling senseless into the undergrowth. Now, barked Aliqua, games are over. They will not be down for long. Move out. And the company, as usual, leaped to obey, all but me. Onsagwe, she shouted, shake off that thing and get moving. I craned my head around to peer uncertainly at Takeri, my contact crew leader. But isn't this what we're here for? I said plaintively. Isn't this contact? He shook his coiled right arm at me, purple with exasperation. This is not contact. This is blundering, incompetent contamination of data, violation of protocols. Who knows how long it will take to overcome this setback? With his left hand, he uncoiled his expressive fingers and underlined his public comments with a personally offensive set of parallel remarks, for my eyes only. Oh. Once again, I could feel myself paling in embarrassment and shame. Onsagwe the outsider makes a mess of things. I looked down at the creature, now crumpled at my feet. Breathing rapidly, it stared back to where the stickmen had fallen. Then it glanced up at me, now confident in its safety, and released its grip on my foreleg. I couldn't explain myself. There was no real evidence. It just looked intelligent. Surely only a fool would walk away now, but I was merely baggage. Foolish baggage. I stepped back carefully, quietly. It rose up to its hind legs. Well, maybe it was really bipedal after all. Still, it stared at me, unafraid. I couldn't help myself. Goodbye, then, I said, for all the world, as if I was talking to a person I bumped into on the street at home. Sorry we can't stay and chat. Continuing to not think at all, I reached out one hand as if expecting it to mesh fingertips, like a civilized person. But it did reach out its forepaw, which had long-fingered hands like a rodent or a person, and our fingers did touch, just barely. It was an electric moment. I felt as if I'd dosed myself with the staser instead of the stickmen. And that's the end of chapter 1. And the secret is, if you go to the Paper Angel Press website and find this book there, there's a free sample in it, which is chapter 2. So you can find out what happens next before you decide whether to run off and buy it for yourself.
Nice. Well, that's awesome. Okay. And I actually took the opportunity to add the Paper Angel Press link there into, yes, because it isn't in the low bar, but it is going there in the ticker. It's pretty obvious it's Paper Angel Press. That's what I typed in. I figured it would come up. So,
excellent. So everyone knows the way to that part. And but this is the book we'll be doing drawings for, and we'll be doing drawings for the audiobook, which is not read by me, The audiobook is read by an actual real live voice actor, so you get all the voices. So.
Well, I like your reading so far. I like
Thank
your
you.
inflections, et cetera, et cetera. So you're doing quite well. So well, and
change
so
of
now
flavor,
book number 2 here.
Away from aliens, and this is a YA story. So the people in the story are the leads in the story are young people, are teenagers. So that's a fair enough setup.
Okay.
This is chapter 1. The working title on the book is Lidian's Promise. However, you will not meet Lydian in chapter 1.
Okay.
Lidian,
L-I-D-I. Lidian's Promise. Okay, because I didn't. This is a little surprise bonus for me too. So I didn't have this one set up ready for your banner. And we do have a couple questions that are out there. And just a reminder, you guys. So we're going to jump into Lidian's Promise here. And if you guys have questions that you would like to ask Vanessa, just put them in the comments, and we will ask them when we are done with this next reading. So we'll get to all of them. Right. Okay, so are you ready?
So we'll change of pace. Nobody's going to throw any spears here. But
no spear
peril. We will still have peril. So Lydian's Promise, Chapter 1, Snowfall. The razor-sharp blade of the snow rake struck deep into the ice at the edge of the roof. Dorette de Ramage held tight as the long wooden handle flailed against her grip like a creature possessed. The moment the vibration eased, she straightened her knees and pulled back, hard and fast, releasing a mini avalanche to splatter the street around her with lumps of heavy, wet snow. Skipping back to dodge the spray, she spun the rake overhead and looked up to decide where to make the next cut. I'm going to save the Guildmaster's house all on my own. They'll see. I won't sit safe in the Great Hall like my sisters. Dorette paused for a moment to give the tool a quick shake, clearing the accumulated ice. If I were a sorcerer, I'd finish it all in one go. She swept her right hand up and swirled her gloved fingers towards the roof, imagining a rain of glowing blue fire that would sink through the surface and melt all the snow in an instant. That's what a sorcerer would do. What I'll do one day, someday, somehow. She pushed aside the dream and took hold of the rake again, shouldering it like a long-handled axe. Eye on the target, Dorette set her aim and steadied her feet for the swing, but then a strange, groaning sound cut through the whistling of the wind. Near the peak of the roof, a jagged black crevasse opened, cutting the snow free. The break widened rapidly as the entire frozen sheet began to slide. Vertical cracks formed, and the broken pieces raced for the edge with a thick, wheezing, panicky hiss like an old man trying to cough out a warning. Tossing the rake aside, Lidian turned to run, but at the first, Dorette turned to run, but at the first step, her left boot broke through the crust and sank deep into the layer below. She bent over, pulling at her knee, struggling to free her foot. Something heavy struck her in the back. She swayed, but her stuck leg kept her from falling. Instinctively, Dorette held up her arms to protect her head just as the full avalanche swept over her. She had only the vaguest impression of a bluish-gray mass swirling in front of her before the world collapsed to a tiny, dark, silent cave. Dorette gasped for breath. The snow had packed itself closely around her chest and now clutched her immovable, like a monstrous snow troll holding her captive in a deep, sunless cavern. The cascading snow had dragged her right arm forward with such force that only the cold kept the pain in her shoulder at bay. She might be pointing the way home, up the hill to the fortress of Louvain, but she had lost all sense of direction. If I could only see, am I standing up or lying down, or am I upside down? Help! I'm here! Her shout only echoed mockingly and left her panting for air. Ice crystals burned as she breathed them in. With her left hand under rapidly numbing fingers, she could just feel the curve of her right arm. With her forehead resting on her left arm, Dorette realized she owed this bubble of air to the shelf formed by her head and shoulders. Where it touched her cheek, her neck, the packed snow transformed, flowing around her headscarf and under her coat, to jab its captive with cold, cruel fingers. I can move my left arm, but if I do, there's a mountain of snow waiting to smother me. Dorette stared into the darkness, listening to her own heartbeat. Surely someone saw. Surely someone will come. The cold seeped through her cloak, through the layers of dresses over trousers she'd pulled on that morning. An icy calm eased herself through her panic, and she steadied her breathing. I'll pretend that we're all playing at troll fighting in the cave on the North Road, that I'm trapped in the shadow room waiting for the secret sorcerer. She bit her lip and made the tears freezing on her cheeks a part of the game. Soon, the secret sorcerer will arrive in his long coat of virage blue, and he will vanquish the snow trolls with a single gesture. Her brother, Turen, had always played the sorcerer because he owned the blue blanket that served for the sorcerer's cloak. Why couldn't it ever have been me? The silence scraped at the edges of her thoughts. No one's coming. No one saw. She pictured her mother and her older sisters and her aunt laboring away alongside the overworked servants, stirring stews and making up beds for those made homeless by the storm. They would have to turn away from that work to prepare her funeral, and then others would suffer. Don't blame anyone else, Mama. This is no one's fault but my own. If I were a sorcerer, I'd make the storm stop. I'd make safe first Louvain, then all the duchies of Maquis. Dorette stared into nothingness. I'll never get to be a sorcerer now. She took another shallow breath. I'll never even meet one. Eloise Bisset pressed her face close to the tiny decorative window at the front of the house. She used her loose headscarf to wipe the moisture from the glass. Maman! What now? Madame Bisset threw up her hands and turned away from a stack of luggage piled near the door. I need to get your sisters packed. Something's happened. Yes, I know. The roof's fallen in over the kitchen. Eloise, stop frittering away your time. No, not that. Outside. There was someone there. Well, they should get inside then. I mean, there was someone, and now there isn't. A boy was clearing our roof, and then he vanished. So he finished and moved on. This isn't a time for boys to be stopping in for tea, young lady. Eloise felt her fists clenching and clamped her teeth into something like a smile. That's not what I meant, Maman. I think he may have fallen or hurt himself. Very well. Send one of the servants, if you must. Turning away from her mother's distracted gaze, Eloise strode across the room and snatched her cloak off the top of the pile. A few steps further took her to the dining room, where the staff worked at packing her mother's favorite crockery into wooden crates. Excuse me, Eloise said. Can someone help? I think one of the workers outside has been hurt. From behind the cook, a tall, thin, vaguely familiar boy stood and waved to her. I'll come, he said. You know I'm awful at handling breakables. How? Unbidden, before she had time to even notice herself blushing, Eloise's hand caught hold of her loose scarf and swept it over her neat, ladylike braids. As she fumbled for the pin she kept fastened just beside her pocket, she finally recognized Edouard, cook's son. It's the clothes. I never saw him out of uniform before. Instead of servant's dress, her childhood friend wore the plain tunic and trousers of a cleric, the white linen gleaming against his delicate bronze skin. Oh, yes, that's right. Edouard, what are you doing here? You're apprentice now, aren't you? As soon as she'd spoken, Eloise wanted to take the words back. I sound just like Maman. Edouard only grinned at her, that old, familiar smile of his. Right you are. So, you'll have to call me Akbar now. I'll be an imam someday, if Imam Azar can pound enough scripture into me. He grabbed a long gray cloak from the back of a chair and shrugged into it. There's no studying today. Thought I'd come help. Where's this hurt man? Just a boy, I think. Eloise led the way right through the front room to the main door. He appeared out of nowhere and started working to clear our roof. I think, Edouard, what are you doing here? At the sound of her mother's voice, Eloise cringed. Helping, Maman. He's just helping today. Edouard, what was his name now, gave her mother a short, respectful bow. Allahu Akbar, Madame Bisset. He slipped past Elwaz and opened the door for her. The pair slipped out into the cold, and Akbar closed the door before Madame could say another word. Elwaz hesitated at the top of the steps, putting words together. She gave Edward a curious look. You named yourself Akbar, as in, it's not what you think. Tell me, quickly, where was this boy working? Akbar frowned, looking out into the street. I don't think all this snow was here when I arrived, not an hour ago. He's right. Where did it all come from? A tremendous heap of snow now filled the street in front of the house, a snow fort built by a giant. Setting her feet carefully, Elwaz moved out from under the eaves and peered upwards. Behind a thinning of the low clouds, the East Range peaks formed the ominous shape of a pointy-headed giant gazing down at the battered town. Akbar ran ahead and climbed the snow pile, though his feet sank in at every step. He bent and tugged at a gleaming object on top of the mound. At first it seemed frozen to the surface, but he broke it free and drew out a long pole attached to the thing. Then he turned and pointed with it to the roof of Elwaz's house. What? Elwaz pulled her cloak tight and followed Akbar up the slope. She stared at the roof, now completely free of snow. He cleared the roof all right, Akbar said. He flipped the rake to make it into a crude shovel and began digging. We don't have much time. He looked from side to side, measuring the length of the pile. Did you see? His breath came in steaming gasps. Do you know exactly where he was? Wait here. Elwaz ran to the window and turned to look back. To your left, she gestured as she shouted. He was to your left. Akbar took 3 steps that way and stopped when she held up her hand. Yes, there. I'm going for help. Elwaz very nearly went back into the house, then pictured what she'd find. Her mother and little sisters, cook, the housemaid, and Papa's elderly valet. Then she took off at a run to the one place she knew would be full of men. Akbar watched Elwaz out of the corner of his eye as he set to digging at the endless pile of snow. He lost sight of her at the end of the next block and allowed himself a bit of hope. She hasn't changed too much these past few years. There's a girl not afraid to run to the public house. The rake proved a poor tool for the job. Akbar tossed it aside and looked to the house, where a pair of decorative pots sat on either side of the door, their flowers black with frost. There! Akbar slid back down the slope, grabbed the nearest pot, and upended it, scattering soil, pebbles, and bits of rotting leaves across the portico. Then he ran back to his digging and used the pot as a scoop, throwing bucket loads of snow backwards, digging like a dog after a rabbit gone to ground. Better, not good, but better. The glazed earthenware absorbed the warmth from Akbar's hands, leaving his fingers aching with cold and clumsier with each scoop. Then one entire load fell directly back into the hole. Akbar grabbed at the pot, barely caught it, but then it slipped free again and tumbled down the slope to crash to pieces. Akbar pulled off his cloak, wrapped his hands in the cloth, and set to digging by hand, standing and kicking snow down the slope whenever it threatened to fall back into the dig. Finally, a chorus of voices came up the road, but he kept digging as they organized themselves. Here now, where's the rake? Don't dig all at once. Hey, Edward, you saved some work for me, eh? Akbar felt a flash of hope as he recognized the voice of his old friend Remy. He looked up and spied Gerard, keeper of the inn and public house, standing behind Remy, and 3 more men beyond, each carrying a spade. Elwaz trotted up behind them, out of breath and wide-eyed with worry. The innkeeper held up the abandoned rake. Step aside now, lad. Akbar slipped on the snow as he moved, and hands reached down from all around to steady him. Let's see if he's where you think now. Gerard carefully pressed the handle of the rake into the bottom of the hole and shook his head as the pole sank nearly to the head of the rake itself. Not quite, not quite. He retrieved the rake and stepped over the hole, then slowly pressed the rake handle down again, just a short distance further up the slope. This time, the rake stopped abruptly, only halfway along the 6-foot handle. Well then, he announced, unless there's a wagon down there, we've got him. Dig, boys, dig. Remy, use Edward's starter there. Dig straight forward now. Edward, you're done for. Go on now. Let us have at it. With that, all 4 men, plus Remy, flew into a frenzy of shoveling. Snow rose in a veritable blizzard from all sides of the rake that Gerard had left standing to mark their target. When the rake handle finally began to tip, Akbar stepped forward and retrieved it. Despite Gerard's orders, He flipped the rake and set to using it to move the snow aside as the others continued to dig downwards. Stop! Remy held his shovel over his head and pointed to a hint of color below the snow. He's here! Don't be knocking his head off now! Everyone dropped their tools and turned to digging bare-handed, not one complaining of the cold. Only the boy's hooded head and shoulders, bent forward away from the house, showed as yet, though his right arm emerged very quickly. Not long after that, Eloise ducked past all the men and dropped flat in the snow to lift the boy's head, freeing the arm it had been resting on. Crystalline patterns of white glimmered on his skin, highlighting the reddish-brown freckles scattered across his smooth, ochre-brown cheeks. With his eyes closed and a natural curl to his blue-tinged lips, the boy might have been only asleep. Akbar held his breath as Eloise tentatively held a finger close to the boy's mouth. He lives! Eloise raised her voice to be sure everyone could hear. You've done it! Success enlivened the diggers as they moved on to freeing the rest of the trapped worker. A familiar, authoritative young voice cut through the cheering. What's happening? Akbar looked around to be sure. Oh, did it have to be Turen? The Duke himself might be of use, but his son? He spends all his free time in the library. I doubt he knows one end of a shovel from the other. Judging himself the least useful rescuer now, Akbar stood and approached Turen. A boy got trapped under the snow, young sir. Turen nodded solemnly. Is that so? Yes, luckily he's alive for now. We need to finish digging him out quickly, or he'll freeze to death. Let me see. After all that time in the cold, the trapped boy would need medical care. Turen might not be much of a digger, but likely he'd be willing to bring in the Duke's physician. Akbar proffered a hand to help the older boy up the slippery, rough surface. The workers gave Turen little nods as he approached, but each kept at his task. How could someone be alive under all this? Are you sure you're not wasting everyone's time? Turen circled around and settled to one knee to look down at Eloise and the rescued boy. The frost-rimed eyes flicked open, and the boy peered upward at Turen, who leapt to his feet with a shout. What kind of a prank is this? That's no worker. That's my sister. Akbar knelt himself to see more clearly in the lowering afternoon light. The boy, no, girl, yes, it was a girl indeed, maybe Eloise's age, spoke then in a thin, distant voice. Have we beaten the trolls yet, Turen? Is the sorcerer coming? And that's the end of chapter 1. Woo!
That, I really liked the feel of that.
Thank you.
In particular.
It's been fun to work on. They have lots of fun adventures.
It actually sounds like I'm slightly disappointed that it is in manuscript form. Because it means that I can't go out and get it.
If anyone wants to be a beta reader, I'm open to beta readers. You can reach out to me at Goodreads. I'm on there.
Goodreads is a thing too. I will have to go give you a follow. I am also on Goodreads, so I like to go. Yes, I like to go.
Yep,
is it just Vanessa MacLaren-Wray?
And my side monikers are always commentary.
So we did have some questions here, and yes, and so since we're doing them all in one, but there was two different,
but they're very different books. So it'll be easy to tell what's what.
Let's see here. So I'm gonna scroll back just a little bit and find question number 1. Let's see. Question number 1. Here we go. Was from Newton File. This was during book number 1. So do you have any instances of scenes or characters that you needed to cut based on peer critiques that you loved? So I think this is instances of scenes or characters that you loved that you needed to cut based on the peer critiques. That's how I'm understanding that question.
Yeah, that kind of thing comes up. Not in this story. Not in all that was asked, because there really aren't all that many characters. It's a pretty tight thing. Though I will tell you that the guy who read the audiobook had some wonderful ideas for accents for some of the characters. I was like, oh yes, that's wonderful.
Because they're aliens, right?
Well, yes, there are lots of aliens in this story.
That's actually kind of cool. Do you have I'm sorry, I'm sort of veering off the beaten path of this question a little bit, but do you have languages for your aliens already done up? Or
I like to play with languages a lot. And since in this story, I don't really need to use their actual language, but I have names that kind of speak to what the language might sound like.
okay.
The names kind of all go together. Onsagwe, Kulandere, Dekanle. There are a lot of names that end with an A sound. And it's not like in English where that has meaning for gender.
Right.
And I've done a fair amount of going back and changing names. For example, in this story, in Lidian's Promise, I had two different beta readers give me comments on character names. For Dorette's older brother, I had kind of made up a sort of the name that sort of sounded kind of like it might belong. And I had a French person reading it, and she said, that name, that's really going to sound like a girl's name. So you need to change that character's name because people are going to, think he's a girl when you first introduce him, and then they'll be all confused when they figure out he's a guy. So I changed the name, and this another character in there has an Arabic name.
Mm-hmm.
And I love to play with languages, so I had put some things into that name that make sense within the language. But my reader said, just simplify it. Just the imam's name, Azar. That's a real name, and that'll sound true. The one you've made up, it's clever, but it's like, just give the guy a real sounding name. So that worked. Yeah. But I play with languages all the time. That's one of my favorites.
Are you versed in any other languages?
I'm best at French.
Best at French.
I'm working on my Gaelic, my Irish right now.
Oh man, good luck with that.
Yes.
That is a crazy language.
It is a fun language. So
we were just talking about it last night at over dinner, actually over Thanksgiving. That came up. So.
Yes, I'm following an Irish pop band right now that sings in Gaelic, and that's great because you get you get to absorb the language, and they publish lyric videos, so you can listen to the fun song and watch the lyrics and get a feel for it. So
that is cool. I think also totally off topic, but I guess also Enya does the same thing, as sings some of her songs in Gaelic. I don't know about. I know what you're talking about with the videos with the lyrics. I don't know if those exist. I would think that probably they do. But anyway, okay. So back to questions. Here we go. This one came in, I think, during book 2, but it's sort of applicable to both of them, which is, do you build massive political and social interactions of the worlds you create? And if so, how do you go about creating that?
I tend to start with characters. And then try to figure out why they're that way. For example, in Lidian, I have characters who are from 3 different social classes become friends. And then a lot necessarily follows from that. You have a post-feudal culture. and then I spend time reading history books, and then I stop writing. But yeah, I like to do world building that ties to our current world, so that partly so that I can understand it better, and also because when you're telling stories, even if you're telling a science fiction story or fantasy story, you're really telling stories about our world. We tell stories about to help us understand ourselves,
right,
and our lives, and why things go wrong, and how things can go right. So if we can have touchstones that we can link to, but then I'll go off on a total tangent. It's like, well, let's see, geographically speaking, where would this be? Oh, it would be a lot like this place. And then, and then 3 days later you come out of Google Earth with a description of the place. I'm not politically, I will sort of outline it, like what the hierarchy would be. In all that was asked, their culture is the alien culture is similar to ours in a lot of ways. But like giant corporations are more openly in charge of things. Criminally funded corporations are cool. It's like everybody knows. Onsequay's family, they are basically the mafia. So and, everybody knows, but they have all the power. So sometimes they do something that's bad enough that somebody has to go to jail, or and bad things do happen to bad people. But if they can control their worser impulses, then they can run things. Which also that does sort of tie to some things that happen in our world, doesn't it?
I'm just over here thinking, is there really a distinction between, huge corporations and criminal mafia organizations? I'm not sure.
Well, Apple doesn't show up to a hearing at Congress with bodyguards who carry guns. That it would be kind of that kind of
indeed.
But they're Onsequay's close relatives. They're trying to go straight, but everybody knows they have a lot of power. So
right.
He does manage to accomplish some things by wielding the family power.
I had a question that I had written down for myself that I would like to, if I may, because I do have a couple other questions from the audience, but
Yes.
Also this one kind of builds on something that you just said, which was about how you describe, the land or the topography, and you will use, Google Earth and whatnot. And the question that I had written down here was, how do you gain a sense of realism for things that you have never done, or places, and events that you've never seen or experienced?
Well, you generally want to build on things you have experienced. So, if I'm writing a scene where I have a girl on a runaway horse galloping through a thunderstorm and down into a ravine, it's like, okay, well, I've certainly been on a runaway horse.
Mm-hmm.
When it was, I have ridden horses when it's raining, so I know, that if you have the mane, your hand just slides off.
Right.
And I have ridden horses up and down hills, but not all at the same time. So you can sort of assemble from that. I haven't done sword fighting, but my son did karate for a lot of years, so I have observed and listened to a lot of really good martial arts teachers. So so I have seen people doing things, and then I tend to kind of identify with what people are doing when they're doing things and kind of imagine myself. A lot of it is just an act of the imagination. So, you need to imagine something and then kind of step back and say, how do I help somebody else imagine it? Because it's we can imagine lots of stuff. I mean, we'll have wonderful dreams and, do wonderful, exciting things. But if you want to tell a story, then you have to back up and say, okay, the weird alien creatures are coming down a hill somehow. Okay, so, and it's an avalanche slope. What's an avalanche slope mean? So you have to have a character who will walk in at some point before that and kind of tell you that an avalanche slope is a very steep area in a mountainous region, which is kind of dangerous to be in. And, and then later you have something happen there, and you kind of set your readers up for that. But, like when a character goes off and does magic, well, I've obviously, unlike yourself, Your Highness, I've never, I do not have magical capabilities. However, I build robots, so I know that, I know you tweak a little button and the little machine on the other side of the room moves, and it's kind of like magic. It gives you sort of a thrill. And there's always that feeling when you see something you haven't seen before. The first time you arrive at the vista at Yosemite, and your heart just goes, oh my God, that you can translate that feeling to any situation where you or seeing something strange and new, whether it's wonderful or scary. That feeling you have when you walk into your bathroom and there's a spider that seems to be this big sitting in your shower, and what do you do? All those feelings work for you've seen a dragon approaching you down the road with flames coming out. Fear is fear.
Right.
It's very well to a new situation. So and I start from characters.
Legit magic. I just want to say that technomancy is legit magic. So you and your robots, that is perfectly acceptable. So here we have do you have your do you do your world building in the beginning before writing or whilst writing?
It is a partial thing. I get an idea for some things that are going to happen to people. Somebody meets an alien and there's a reason that they need to take it back. Okay, so then I have to say, well, how did they get there? So I kind of have to start the story and kind of invent my characters. So I have a motivation to go to all the work to have a world for them to be together in. And all that was asked, okay, so Ansukwe has gone to an alien alternate universe. How did he get there? He's just a young guy. He's like college student age. Well, how did he get on this thing? Okay, so he must be sort of an intern, but they don't normally send interns on really dangerous things. So he must have some influence. Okay, well, his family is funding the thing. Okay, so his aunt says, put him on the team, and they say, okay, which then creates things in the story because you just jam somebody onto a scientific research team and everybody's going to be going, oh yeah, right. Poet guy is on the team. Woo, great. He's going to be a wonderful contribution. So you can have some, so that kind of, so it kind of loops around and then he goes home and then he has to deal with that he's adopted this alien creature who is in fact has been disabled by things that happen and how's he going to navigate that because he's a young person. He doesn't need to know how to do paperwork and bureaucracy and how does he get stuff paid for and is he going to use his family's power to bully people into doing what he wants because right. Why are we going to take care of this scary alien? We should just dissect it. Right. And so it kind of goes back and forth. I get the story to a certain point, say, well, this is not going to work unless I have a mechanism, and then it kind of works together. So, in short, if you're doing NaNoWriMo, okay, I'm a panther, pretty much. And I get to a certain point and say, okay, you need to put the suspenders on and figure out how this can work. And sometimes that does mean you get to a point and you say, oh, I really need to go back and change some stuff at the beginning because the stuff I was writing at the beginning isn't going to work within the world I'm creating because as you loop around, as you recurs, it gets better. It improves the story as you add more depth because it's kind of like working on, I don't know, I've seen artists work who kind of do a sketch and they got the idea and then they think about the colors and they put their washes on and at each stage it's kind of looking kind of awful. And then they'll do something, they'll kind of put color all over it and you say, why are you doing that? Oh, and then they'll just build on top of that and say, oh, I see, you're just kind of building your back. You have this pretty background behind you, which is, kind of evokes that feeling of depth, that an artist can do. And we're trying to do the same thing, only we have words and humans are very visual. So, but there's so much that's behind, this is a little book, but I could go on and on about the government of Corlo and how it works and the other countries and how they have these little conflicts about things and that, Family Varela has their hooks in like 5 of the 7 major governments of the world. And, they run the satellites and beam down power. So they don't have our problems with electricity because they've got clean energy. But the clean energy is run by criminal enterprise. So you don't want to tick them off. And
the clean energy is run by Exxon. No, okay, so so I do have another question here in the audience, from the audience. And before I ask it though, this is the point where I will say, if you are out there watching at home, now is the time that you guys type your name into the comment section if you would like to be entered into today's drawing, which we will do after we take this last question. So we're drawing 2 today, one for the physical copy of the book and one for an audio copy of the book. Just put your name in the comments, and as those come in, then I will get them added onto the wheel of win, and then we'll spin, spin, spin. So our last question that we have here, no, not literally the word your name, Newton. Very funny. No, snark. Your handle, you can put your handle, that's fine. Okay, so here we go. This one is, hi, John here. Are there any secrets from the book or from your worlds that you can share with your readers? So things that might not otherwise be in the book, I think is what we're looking for. Like, I don't know. So you know what I mean? Like little tidbits that maybe went into the making of, or something that maybe got.
I mean, it's pretty what about the characters? Well, the alien character in the story, I will say, went to college in California.
Actual college in California.
And that completely does not come out in this story. So it's completely a secret.
The behind the scenes tidbit.
From the University of California, Berkeley.
Okay, so I just have one more question that I want to ask. Let's see, which is kind of, but how do you find the word or words for things that you don't know the words for? So say, for example, I know that armor that is worn has this shoulder thing that goes, but I don't know what that is called. How do you find the word to describe something, especially when we're talking about alien cultures, that you don't even know what word to search for because you have no idea?
Well, it's like any other kind of research. I full confession, I'm a PhD. So
the words are kind of.
So, you start with the things that you do know. So if, for example, it was armor, I would just go do a lot of research on armor until I found posted a diagram with all the parts of armor. And then if I was trying to do something in an alien world, see, if I'm trying to make up something for an alien world, and I know, okay, there's some kind of armor thing that they're going to have. Maybe they're, I don't know, space warriors and they need kind of armor. But, historically they're people, right? So they're going to call it something similar to what's real. And you want real armorers to like you. So, I would go and look up what things are currently called. And then I would find an analog to what I want in my story. And then if I wanted to be really outre, I would go and look up the same things in another language. So I might look it up in French, like in Lidian's Promise. It's a post-feudal culture, so it appears to be just bows and arrows and stuff like that. And then some people arrive who have guns. Okay, but they don't call them guns. They don't call them rifles because they're very early guns, so they're carabines.
Carabines.
Yeah, so they're carbines. What we call them carbines, but my culture is francophone. Like New Orleans, so they use a lot of French. So I looked up, okay, what would they call it in France? So it sounds cooler because it's in the story, and it's not quite exactly. But like a person who is into old-timey guns would go, oh yeah, I know what that is. So you want to please people and sound cool at the same time, which is
yes. Everybody feels like suddenly their little corner of esoteric knowledge.
Well, oh yeah. I like to put in things. I was drafting something for a group recently, and I said, oh, I know, I'm gonna look up some of these phrases in native languages, just to have fun with it. And then I spent like a whole day learning
down that rabbit hole.
That's really interesting. Oh, and the Hopi kind of keep their language pretty close. It's private, so even if you know this even if you find some stuff, you're not supposed to share it because it's a private cultural thing. It's not. I like the Navajo are like, yeah, great, learn Dene, it's cool, So that's I love languages. It's just it's an avocation, not a true skill.
Well, Native American languages especially, they don't translate anything like directly. So you can have one small word, but then it's really long.
Yeah. So I know YouTubers now do language lessons in Navajo. That's cool.
So what is, if you don't mind my asking, what is your PhD in?
Oh, my PhD is in mechanical engineering and engineering economic systems.
There you go.
And energy science, electric power systems. So it was really fun when you riffed on Exxon. Yes. Oh yeah, yes. I have a book here on my shelf about how climate change is a big problem, and that book is from 1973. So
wow.
Yeah, so I've been worrying about that since
a long time ago.
Yeah, so go solar,
right?
go wind. Yes, you can put batteries in. The sun doesn't shine all the time, but we have batteries now. It's modern times.
It's modern times.
It's modern times.
So here's a question. Now that you've revealed this little bit about yourself, and then I promise, like after this question, I'll get all the names on the wheel and we'll do the drawing. But I am curious: having quite a technical background, when you write fantasy, does this mean that your fantasy is? I mean, do you like to write that hard science? And when you describe fantastical things, you feel like there must be a logical basis for the fantasy or the magic that is being used? Or do you kind of take the approach of, and it works because magic happened?
Well, I like, when I'm reading fantasy stories, I like magic that has rules. That you run out of mana, or you need to have a connection to a certain deity in order to make something happen. I like rules-based magic, which so it's almost like saying if I'm in a magical universe, I'm going to just tell myself as an engineer, they just have different physical laws here, and and perhaps it's in the nature of only a certain kind of being can access the energy, whatever the woo might be that makes it work, or maybe it's a matter of just training. Although that's not as much fun as having something special about you that enables you to access the arcane.
Right.
But I like it that I like to kind of build it so that there is a rule-based thing to it, and that some people can do some things and other people can do other things, and which creates problems for characters because, if you want to be a shapeshifter and you're not a shapeshifter, sorry, you might be able to learn to teleport because it might be more mechanistic and you just have to get evil enough to have a major access to energy to move something.
Get evil enough.
But yeah, I do like rules-based stories, but but that includes, like I am a huge Tolkien fan. I mean, I have all the Tolkien. I have, I know all the stuff in the Silmarillion.
All the Tolkien.
I read all the appendices. But because that gives you there's so much detail. I mean, and everything, things that elves can do work because of what elves are in the greater mythology of Tolkien's universe.
Yes.
And the magic rings work because of, it isn't just, whoa, the magic ring works. It's like the ring works because Sauron made it in a certain way, in a certain place, using certain techniques and his own personal power,
Right.
So
his extended universe, I guess, if you will, is certainly more. It's very in depth. So
Yeah, none of us is ever going to replicate that. So
right.
we don't. We just reference it once in a while to kind of say, "Oh yes."
Okay, so I think I've got
Lots of names.
Yes, I do have a lot of names. Okay, I have to add. I see you, Amy and Griffin. Let me get these added here. Gunther is out there helping us gather up names from some of the places that I can't see names from actually.
Over from Facebook, maybe. Yeah.
Yeah. So it took me a while to learn this actually, but when there are watch parties, I cannot see when people put comments in watch parties, and it took
those
me.
Are kind of private, yeah.
Yes, because and so it doesn't actually come through on my back end here, and so for a while, so I have Amy Long, Griffin Young, and Amy Harris. Okay, and yeah, it was it took a while to realize that people were trying to put comments in, and not.
Yeah, they need to have another device while they're on their watch party. Here's the hint: you run it on another device that YouTube, and then you can put comments live while your friends are putting them in your watch group.
Right? Okay. I think that is that's all I see having come through. This is the last one. Okay. Yes. So yeah, and so Gunther is out there helping us actually round up all the names. So I think that's everybody. The last one, Azrael Schweitzer. One more, you say? No. Yeah. Okay. One more. No more.
Oh, that's it.
Okay. And so now here we go. I will share the screen so that you guys can see the wheel, and then we will do 2 drawings. We'll do the first one for the physical book, and the second one for the audio book. As you can see. Yes.
I will sign it though. So,
yay. Okay.
Enter your info. Say how you want it signed.
Okay, I will be sure to get that from our winners. Yes. So here is our list, and I'm gonna
You have lots of followers. Bravo.
All of our Patreon patrons get automatically added to every single drawing that we do. So they are already there, and then if they happen to be watching from the comments, they get a second entry. And then everybody else who is also in the comments gets their single entry. So, oh boy, Solaroff. That's how I would pronounce that. Yes, so, this is one of our Patreon patrons.
Cool moniker.
Yeah.
Can I have that for a story?
You can just sign that I feel as though that person would appreciate the use of that.
That'll be the default unless you ask for something else.
I will double check. So we will take that name off the list, reopen it again, and this is for the audiobook now of all that was asked, and Count Macduff. Well, that Mr. Grumpy Pants ought to be pleased with winning a book. So also one of our Patreon patrons. I eventually become a little familiar with folk after. So congratulations to you guys, Solaroff and Count Macduff, on winning, yes, a physical copy and then the audiobook copy today. So thank you so much for coming on the show and actually for hanging out with us. We have definitely gone over our time today, and it's been it's been wonderful. So, and a chillax thing to do after the food comas of yesterday.
I'm not over it.
No, I need to go get pie now. Let's have pie.
I have tasty key lime pie waiting in the refrigerator. So I shall have to also join you in the delicious pie eating. But is there anything you would like to say to everybody before we let you go this afternoon?
Well, thank you. Obviously, thank you for having me. This is so much fun. I love all the names that people have in chat. It's just great. I love hanging out in chats myself. It's been really hard not to get in there. Besides my own book, all of the Paper Angel Press digital editions are only 99 cents all weekend, which is
nice.
Wow.
Great. So some good Black Friday cyber. Yeah.
Yeah, and if you want a hardcover, this book comes in hardcover as well, but you have to go to Barnes and Noble for a hardcover.
Aha.
Only Barnes and Noble does the hardcovers, so we love them. So, and I also encourage people, if you're not buying directly from the press, indiebound.org will send it to your local bookstore. You can support your local bookstore through independent entities like an IndieBound, and so you can order the book and then just drive over to your bookstore.
And there it is. Well, yeah, and so the last, tell me real quick, what is indiebound.com? Just so
it's like Amazon, only you go there and you say, I want to buy X book. I want to buy All That Was Asked by Vanessa MacLaren-Wray. And it comes up and you click on it and it says, here are all the bookstores in your area. Which one would you like to pick it up at?
Oh,
and
wow.
They send the money to your bookstore, and then your bookstore gives you the book. It is wonderful.
I did not know that was a thing. So thank you for
stuff.
Bringing that up, for sure.
Yeah. There are, and I've got links to both of the independent bookstore sites on my site at commentarytales.com.
Okay. Yeah, that
so
one.
You can link directly to that from my site if you want. Bookstore sites.
So with that said, the one thing I like to say to everybody before we sign off for the day is, if you go buy the books, please leave the reviews, because the reviews always help the indie authors wherever they are, and that is it. Just leave the review. Very important, usually, to everybody. So, and yes, so Paper Angel. I cannot get that out of my mouth right the first time. Paper Angel Press this weekend. Everything is 99 cents for the electronic versions of the books. Go check them out, because this is the weekend to do the shopping. So yes, it is. So get out there, do the thing. And with that said, we will be back here day after tomorrow on Sunday at 4 p.m. for Handmade Home Shopping. Please, guys, hit the like and subscribe button for us, and go give the follows and thumbs up. Yes, information for Vanessa is also in the low bars of wherever you're watching from. So you can find that. It won't come down. It'll be up on YouTube and Facebook and Twitch and all the places. So thank you so much for being here. I hope everybody had a happy day of feasting yesterday and stuffed your bellies. So with that said, good afternoon, everybody, and enjoy the rest of your weekend. We will see you on Sunday. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.